They said Coulter Reeves only spoke when it was absolutely necessary. The kind of man who'd rather mend fences at dawn than join a card game in town. But something shifted the day he found her barefoot, bruised, and clutching nothing but silence by the weather-worn post at the edge of his land. Folks around Bent Willow knew not to meddle with strangers, not in a land where names meant everything. Yet Coulter did something no one expected. He brought her in. The wind that morning carried the dry scent of pine and old dust. Coulter had been riding the ridge just after sunup, his chestnut mare kicking stones down the slope. The air was sharp, and storm clouds were pacing the far hills. That's when he saw her thin as a fence rail, wrapped in a tattered shawl, eyes wide and vacant, like she'd been running from something darker than night itself. She didn't speak when he asked her name, didn't cry when he offered his coat, just nodded. Barely, when he said, "You ain't safe out here, miss." Back at his cabin, nestled between cedar pines and dry creek bed, Coulter lit the fire and boiled coffee while she sat near the hearth. She wouldn't touch the bread, but her eyes followed his every move, wary, worn out. "Ain't much," he muttered, setting down a plate. "But you can stay the night. Long as you need. I'll keep quiet, if that helps." He wasn't used to company, especially not the kind that trembled when the wind howled or flinched at the sound of boots on wood, that night. As sleet tapped gently on the cabin roof, and the fire threw long shadows across the room, Coulter sat carving a bit of pine by lamplight. She finally spoke, just for words. Soft, nearly broken. "Don't tell the town." He looked up, met her eyes dark, sunken, and too old for her years. "Reckon they don't need to know," he said simply. And that settled it. In the days that followed, she didn't ask questions, and neither did he. She helped sweep the porch, fed the chickens, even patched his old work shirt with hands that had clearly known finer things, but she still hadn't told him her name. And though Coulter wasn't the type to pry, he noticed things: a scar behind her left ear, the way she never faced the mirror, the night she cried out in her sleep and whispered something about the red house. Winter hung on that year longer than usual. Townfolk came and went, none asking after a lost girl, but word started to stir anyway. Silas at the feed store asked why Coulter needed an extra sack of flour. Old Mags from the chapel said she saw smoke from Coulter's chimney late at nights, said maybe the recluse ranch hand had taken in a wild animal or worse. And though none of them had proof, suspicion was enough to start tongues wagging. But Coulter didn't care. "She ain't trouble," he said one evening to the wind, mostly to himself. She had fallen asleep by then, curled on the old leather chair. The lamplight softened the angles of her face, and for a moment, he imagined who she might have been before whatever tore through her life. A schoolteacher, a preacher's daughter, a runaway from back east. It didn't matter. Not yet. Then came the moment that would begin to crack open everything. Coulter found a folded letter in the folds of her shawl while shaking it out one morning, sealed in red wax. The initials AG on the back. He didn't open it. Just stared at it a long while, thumb grazing the seal like it burned. When she saw him holding it, her eyes widened in fear, not anger, not shame, but pure fear. "Where'd you get that?" she whispered. "It was in your shawl," he answered gently. "I didn't read it." Her hands shook as she took it back, pressing it to her chest like a shield. "Promise me you'll never let them see this." "Not the sheriff. Not the pastor. No one." Coulter nodded slowly. "You have my word." And in that moment, something between them changed. Not love, not yet, but a fragile kind of trust that only forms when one soul recognizes the shattered corners of another. He didn't need answers just yet. Only time. And maybe sheltering her was exactly what he'd been meant to do all along. If this story touched something in you, I'd love to hear what you think her real name might be, or what you think's written in that letter. Leave a comment, and don't forget to follow along. This story's just beginning. The red wax seal stayed unbroken, tucked deep into the folds of her patched skirt as if it were a part of her skin. Coulter never brought it up again, but he noticed how she touched it when she thought he wasn't looking, like a prayer or a wound. The days passed quietly. Snow blanketed the ridge and flattened the sound of everything. In that stillness, something unspoken settled between them, like the hush before a song. Coulter kept to his habits, chopping wood before dawn, brushing down the horses, fixing the corral gate that the wind kept pulling loose. And she fell into his rhythm with an ease that surprised him. She swept the floor without being asked, started the fire before he came in for supper, mended the strap on his saddle like she'd done it 100 times. He didn't ask where she learned those things. He figured, in time, maybe she'd tell him one evening, while the sky flushed purple behind the hills. She stood by the cabin window, silent, holding one of Coulter's flannel shirts like it was a map. "You always live like this?" she asked, voice soft. "Alone?" Coulter looked up from the stew pot and shrugged. "Suits me fine," he said. Then, after a pause, "Doesn't mean I don't get tired of it, though." She didn't answer, just stared at the snow line in the distance. He watched her eyes trace something invisible out there, like a memory was hiding beneath the snow. "You said not to tell the town," he said slowly. "But someone might be looking. You in danger?" Her eyes flinched at the word, but she didn't turn. "Not anymore. Least not the kind you're thinking." That night, the letter fell from her skirt pocket while she slept, curled in the old wool blanket on the floor near the stove. Coulter picked it up, thought about putting it back but instead set it on the mantel. Next morning, she found it there. Her fingers hovered over it for a moment before she finally looked at him and said, "It's from my sister. It's the last thing I have from her." Her voice broke then. "And if I open it, it's the last thing I'll lose." She didn't explain. He didn't press. Coulter knew the feeling of loss too well. He still kept the pocket knife his brother gave him. The day before that cattle stampede took his life. Never opened it. Not once. Some things hurt more unopened than gone. One morning, after a thaw, Coulter saddled the mare and told her, "I need to head to town for supplies. If you'd rather not be seen." She shook her head before he could finish. "I'll go with you." He paused. "You sure?" "I'm tired of hiding from things I didn't do," she said simply. The ride into Bent Willow was slow. The muddy trail churned underfoot, and clouds threatened rain. As they neared the general store, she pulled Coulter's hat lower over her brow. Inside, heads turned. Mags at the counter squinted through her spectacles. "Well, I'll be Reeves bringing a lady in from the hills. Must be a blue moon." He gave a faint smile, said nothing. She kept quiet, eyes fixed on the shelves. But when they passed the old bulletin board near the door, she froze. Her hand went to her mouth. There, half-torn, damp and curling, was a faded wanted poster. Not of her, but of a man. Brown hair, sharp chin. Reward, $200, for questioning in the disappearance of Annabelle Grace Callahan. Coulter noticed the way her shoulders tensed. "You know him?" he asked low. She nodded. "He's the reason I ran. And Annabelle, that's me." Breath caught, but he didn't say a word. Just reached out, gently folded the edge of her sleeve in his fingers, and walked her out of the store like the poster didn't exist. They rode home in silence. The wind had changed, and something brittle sat between them. Unspoken. That night, by the fire, she finally said it. "I was supposed to marry him, but he wasn't what he seemed. My sister found out. She tried to stop it. Then she vanished. He blamed me." Coulter sat across from her, the old pine chair creaking under his weight. "You think she's still out there?" She looked at the letter in her hands. "I don't know, but if she is, this letter might be the only way to find her." She looked up, eyes glassy. "I just haven't had the courage to open it." Coulter leaned forward. "Then maybe you don't have to open it alone." That moment, quiet and raw, was the first time he saw her, not as a stranger, not as a mystery to be solved, but as someone deeply human, and perhaps someone who needed this cabin just as much as he did. The letter sat between them for 3 days, unopened, waiting, sometimes on the mantel, sometimes beside her plate, sometimes cradled in her palms like a fragile flame. Coulter didn't push. He figured some things, like a thaw, had to come slow or not at all. Morning frost still glazed the windows, but the snow was beginning to soften. Spring would come soon, though the mountain didn't give up winter easy. The girl Annabelle, he reckoned now, though she still hadn't said the name aloud, had started humming while she worked. Just little things. Bits of songs she didn't seem to know she remembered. Coulter noticed he noticed everything. One afternoon, as he chopped kindling out back, he caught her standing in the pasture with his mare, hand resting on the animal's flank, like they'd known each other a lifetime. She spoke soft to it, the way Coulter spoke to fence rails and troubled skies. That evening, she cooked nothing fancy, just beans and cornbread, but it filled the cabin with warmth. When she set the plate in front of him, she smiled. "I used to cook for my father before he passed." Her voice caught again, just slightly. "He always said I had a gift for turning nothing into supper." Coulter glanced up. "You don't have to keep running, you know," he said gently. "I know this place don't look like much, but there's room here, for healing, for silence, for whatever you need." She looked down at her hands, rougher now than when she arrived. "You're kind," Coulter. But I've got ghosts bigger than this cabin. Then she added, after a long breath, I'm not sure who I am without them. That night, something shifted. A knock at the door, loud, not frantic. Just 3 calm raps, slow and deliberate. Coulter was on his feet in an instant, rifle in hand. She stood frozen near the fire. The knock came again. Coulter opened the door with care. Outside stood a man in a black duster, wide-brimmed hat, low over his brow. Tall, lean, hands gloved. "Evening," he said, voice smooth like creek water. "Over stone. I'm looking for someone. Thought maybe you could help." Coulter didn't answer. His grip on the rifle didn't ease. "I ain't here for trouble," the man added, lifting both hands. "Name's Elijah Vane. Private investigator. Hired out of Wichita." He reached into his coat slowly, pulled out a folded paper. "Girl, gone missing. Sister left behind a letter. Said she might be heading this way. Said she was scared." Behind Coulter, the fire crackled. "She hadn't moved." "I don't know that girl," Coulter said flatly. "You best keep looking elsewhere." Elijah didn't move. Just studied Coulter's face a beat longer than necessary. Then he nodded once. "If you see her, tell her her sister's alive. And she's waiting." Then he turned, walked back to his horse, and rode off into the dusk without another word. Inside, Annabelle had sunk to her knees. "She's alive," she whispered. He said she's alive. Coulter knelt beside her. "Sounds like you've got more future than past now." She looked at him, tears streaking silent down her cheeks. "I thought I was all that was left." She opened her hand, and the letter lay there creased, smudged, and trembling. "Coulter, I think I'm ready." But she couldn't open it. Not yet. She needed one more night. One more dreamless sleep beside the fire. And he gave her that. Without question. The next morning, as dawn painted the hills gold, Coulter saddled both horses. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To town," he said. "You're gonna meet this man. On your terms." She hesitated. "And what if it's a trick?" "Then I'll be there," he said simply. "And I ain't much good with words, but I'm better than most." With trouble, her lips twitched half smile, half sorrow. "You know, you never asked what my real name was." "I figured it wasn't mine to take," he replied. She stepped closer, reached up, touched the collar of his coat. Her eyes were steady now. "It's Annabelle Grace Callahan." She said it slow, like unburying something precious. "I used to hate it. Sounded too proper, too breakable. But now, it feels like something I want to keep." He gave her a quiet nod. "Then let's go keep it." Bent Willow hadn't changed much in 20 years. Same crooked signpost by the livery. Same dirt main street that turned to soup every time the rain came down. But that morning, as Coulter and Annabelle rode side by side into town, something felt different. Like the wind itself had leaned in to listen. She wore one of Coulter's old coats. Sleeves rolled, collar turned up. Her hair was pulled back. Simple, clean, though the dark circles beneath her eyes hadn't yet faded. Coulter kept a steady pace beside her, hat low, eyes scanning every face that passed. They stopped just outside the general store, where a few townsfolk loitered near the barrels. Conversations died as they dismounted. Mags gave a long squint. "That the girl with no name?" She whispered to no one in particular. Coulter helped Annabelle down gently, his hand lingering longer than necessary. She gave him a glance that held both thanks and fear. Elijah Vane was already waiting. He leaned against the rail outside the boarding house, one boot resting on the lowest rung, a toothpick in his teeth, and his hat tipped back just enough to see the cold calculation in his eyes. He didn't rise when they approached, just watched him, like a man watching clouds before a storm. "You came," he said. Annabelle stepped forward. "You said my sister's alive." Elijah nodded. "Name's Rachel. She sent the letter that brought me looking. Told me what happened, what she saw." He reached into his coat and handed Annabelle a small, worn photograph. 2 girls, side by side, one with wild curls and a crooked, grin, clearly Rachel. The other was Annabelle, younger, softer, unaware of what the years would take from her. Annabelle's knees buckled slightly, and Coulter was there before she could fall. Elijah continued, slower this time. "Rachel's safe now, but she's sick. Consumption's got hold of her lungs. She wanted you to know the truth. She never blamed you. And she forgives you for leaving." Annabelle held the photo like it might vanish. "She knew I didn't have a choice," she whispered. Elijah gave a small nod. "She always did. That man, the one they say you were supposed to marry, he's been laying low since Rachel made noise. But he's still out there. Somewhere between Kansas and Arizona. Got friends in dark places. Coulter's jaw tightened. So what's next? Elijah looked between them. That depends. Rachel's in a convent 2 counties south. If you want to see her, I can take you. But it'll be a hard road. No guarantees. Annabelle stared at the photo a long while. Then looked at Coulter. You think I should go? He didn't answer right away. Just studied her. The wind brushing strands of her hair across her cheek. I think you've carried a lot alone. If this gives you peace, you ought to follow it. But I ain't letting you ride into that without someone beside you. She blinked. You'd come with me. He met her gaze. I've lived quiet. A long time. Maybe too long. But I reckon God don't send folks to your porch for no reason. If your road leads south, I'll ride. Tears brimmed in her eyes, but she smiled. Then I guess I'm not alone anymore. Elijah folded his arms, nodding once. We leave at first light. It's a long way through rough country. As Coulter led her horse toward the stable, Annabelle lingered a moment longer on the boardwalk, eyes sweeping over the town that had nearly swallowed her. Then she turned to Elijah. Why'd you really come? She asked. Most men don't chase ghosts for just a letter. Elijah paused. His voice, when it came, was quieter. Because once, I let a good woman disappear into the world, and I never went after her. Regret's a sharp thing, Miss Callahan. She said nothing more. That night, back at the cabin, Annabelle sat by the fire with the letter finally open in her lap. The handwriting was her sister's loopy, familiar, aching with love. Annabelle, it read, if you get this, I want you to know I remember everything. I remember your hands shaking as you packed your bag. I remember the bruise you tried to hide. I remember the way you whispered my name when you ran. You didn't fail me. You saved me. Please come. I've held your name in prayer every day. I need to see you again before I go. She folded the letter and pressed it to her heart, eyes full. I'm ready, she said. Coulter looked up from the hearth. Then we ride. The morning broke cold and clean. A thin mist clung to the pines, as if the mountain was reluctant to let her go. Coulter saddled the horses in silence. Annabelle folded the letter one last time, tucking it into the leather pouch, around her neck, right over her heart. Elijah Vane waited at the edge of the clearing, his horse dark and lean, eyes sharp beneath his hat brim. They rode in single file down the ridge trail, past the creek that had once frozen over so thick Coulter could walk across it barefoot. The sun cut through clouds now and then, warming the hillsides in quiet gold. No one spoke much. The rhythm of hooves, the creak of saddle leather, and the rustle of wind in the dry sagebrush filled the spaces where words would have once gone. As they reached the valley floor, Annabelle turned in her saddle. Did she ask for me by name? Rachel, Elijah nodded. Said she dreamed of you in a house made of red stone. Said your laugh used to come before your footsteps. Annabelle closed her eyes at that. She used to braid my hair before school. Told me I was too quiet for my own good. She was the loud one. Coulter gave a soft chuckle behind them. Hard to imagine someone louder than you now. She smiled faintly, tears threatening. I wasn't always this way. By noon, the land had flattened into a wide sweep of prairie. The storm Elijah warned about began to stir just beyond the southern hills, black and heaving like a memory trying to break through. They stopped beneath a rocky outcrop to rest the horses. Coulter checked the cinches, while Elijah scanned the horizon. You think he knows? Coulter asked. Who? That man. The one she was supposed to marry. Elijah took a long look south. If he's smart, he's far from here. But men like that, they don't forget what they lose. Sometimes they follow it without knowing. Why? Annabelle sat a few yards off, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the sky. Do you believe in redemption? She asked suddenly. Coulter looked over. I don't think it's something you get all at once. I think it's built slow, like fences after a windstorm. Piece by piece. She nodded. I just want to be someone she'd still recognize. That night, they camped beneath a leaning cottonwood near an old watering hole. Elijah took first watch. Coulter sat across from Annabelle, the fire casting soft shadows across her face. She looked tired in a new way, just from the trail, but from hope. Like the weight of wanting something was heavier than fear itself. I don't know what I'll say to her, she whispered. You'll know when it's time, Coulter said gently. Some things don't need rehearsing, just heart. She paused. You think I'm still broken? Coulter stirred the embers with a stick. You think the land's broken when it cracks open to make room for roots? She looked at him then, full on, with something deeper than gratitude, old and careful, something neither of them could name yet. But it was there. In the middle of the night, thunder rolled across the plains, low and long. Elijah woke Coulter. "We've got company," he muttered. One rider, approaching slow. Coulter grabbed his rifle. Annabelle stood behind them, pale in the firelight. A single horse broke the dark, reins loose. Rider hunched. The storm's edge painted the scene in flickering silver. As the rider neared, Elijah stepped forward. "Hold up," he called. "State your name." The rider stopped. A woman, wrapped in a pale blue shawl, hair wild and face thin but unmistakable. Annabelle stepped forward, disbelief crackling in her breath. "Rachel." The woman slid from the saddle and nearly collapsed. But Annabelle caught her. They both fell to their knees, clinging to each other like the earth had opened and they were the only thing keeping it together. "I couldn't wait," Rachel sobbed. "I had to find you." Coulter lowered his rifle. Elijah looked away, eyes wet. The sisters rocked gently in the dust, weeping, laughing, speaking in half sentences only they understood. Later, wrapped in blankets by the fire, Rachel's breath was shallow, her voice cracked. "I have so little time. I just wanted to see your face, to know you made it." Annabelle clutched her hand. "I'm here, and I'm not running anymore." Rachel smiled, the kind of smile that knows both pain and peace. "Then I can rest. Easy." "Did this reunion hit your heart like it did mine? What do you think Annabelle will do, now that she has her sister back, if only for a little while? Share your thoughts below. Morning came slow, pulling gray light across the prairie like a veil. The fire had burned down to coals, and the wind carried the scent of rain and sage. Rachel lay curled beneath Coulter's extra blanket, breath shallow, but steady, her hand never far from Annabelle's. The sisters had fallen asleep that way, hands clasped, as if letting go might undo the miracle that had brought them back together. Coulter stood a few paces off, coffee tin in hand, watching the horizon. Elijah was already up, feeding the horses. Neither man said much, but their silence was full of meaning. Something about the sky didn't sit right. The kind of stillness that came before the world shifted. Annabelle stirred, just after sunup. Her face looked younger somehow, like the reunion had peeled back the years. "She didn't sleep much," she said softly. "Coughed most the night." Coulter nodded. "She's strong, just like you." Annabelle looked down at Rachel, then back at him. "I don't feel strong. I feel like glass held together by prayers." Coulter stepped closer. "Then maybe it's not strength that matters. Maybe it's what you do with the pieces." They packed slowly, careful not to jostle Rachel too much. Elijah fashioned a sling from spare blankets so she could ride behind him. She protested, but only once weakly, and he gave her a look that brooked no argument. By noon, they were headed west, toward the convent Elijah had mentioned. It sat beyond the hills, near a dry riverbed and an old orchard. The road twisted through scrub brush and red rock, with no clear trail, only the instinct of someone who knew the land by its moods. Annabelle rode beside Coulter, her shoulders straighter than before. "If we make it," she said quietly, "I want to start again. With my name, my sister, my story. I don't want to live scared anymore." Coulter looked over, his voice low and sure. "Then don't. You've already walked through fire." They made camp early that night, under the shadow of a stony bluff. Rachel was fading, her lips pale, voice thinner than the air. "Belle," she rasped. "The man. He's still looking. He's not gonna let it be." Annabelle leaned close. "Let him come," she whispered. "This time I have people beside me. This time I'm not hiding." Later, when the others slept, Elijah sat with Coulter by the fire. "There's something you should know," Elijah said. "I tracked the man Annabelle ran from. He's close. I found his camp a day behind us. He's not alone." Coulter's jaw flexed. "And you waited to tell me this now?" "I didn't want her to run again. She needs to stand still, just once, and trust someone else to fight." Coulter nodded slowly. "Then let him come." The next morning, with the convent just half a day ahead, Rachel asked for something strange. "I want to burn the letter," she said, barely audible. "It served its purpose. I don't want to carry that weight anymore. Let it go." Annabelle hesitated. "But it brought us together." Rachel gave a soft smile. "Then it's done its job. Now we start new." They built a small fire near a ring of stones, and Annabelle knelt beside her. Slowly, with trembling hands, Rachel unrolled the worn parchment. The ink had faded, the paper yellowed. She held it to Annabelle. "You do it," she said. "Set me free." With tears in her eyes, Annabelle pressed the letter to the flame. It curled and blackened, smoke lifting into the morning sky like a final goodbye. Rachel watched until it was nothing but ash. They rode on, hearts quieter, lighter. But as the sun climbed high, and the convent came into view, white stone, simple cross, bell tower reaching skyward, Coulter spotted something that chilled him. Fresh, more than one horse. Elijah cursed under his breath. Too late. They're here. Coulter turned to Annabelle. You ride ahead with your sister. Get to safety. And you, I'll stay behind. Slow them down. I've run cattle through tougher men. She shook her head fiercely. I'm not leaving you. He reached for her hand, rough fingers curling around hers. I've lived in shadows my whole life, Belle. You were the first light I ever let in. Let me protect it. She stared at him, then at Rachel, so pale now, barely holding on. Finally, she nodded. Just come back to us. He gave a half smile. Always. The bell tower of the convent stood silent against the sky, its cross dark against the light. Annabelle didn't look back as she rode through the arched gate. Rachel's fragile arms around her waist, the mare's hooves pounding like a heartbeat. She trusted him. Coulter trusted the way his eyes had steadied her, the way his voice never rose in fear. But even trust couldn't quiet the storm in her chest. Behind them, Coulter stood in the dust with Elijah, just beyond the bluff. The wind had picked up, and with it came the sound of riders. 3 of them. The first wore a dark blue coat, long and fine like a banker's. The second had a rifle strapped to his back, and a scar splitting his lip. But the third, he was the one Coulter knew without introduction. Silver spurs, black gloves, pale hair, tied at the nape, and a smile like a knife. Coulter Reeves, the man said, reining in his horse. Didn't expect to see you playing shepherd. Coulter kept his voice even. You got no business here. On the contrary, the man replied, dismounting slowly. I came for what's mine. Elijah stepped forward, hand on his revolver. She ain't yours, Vincent. Never was. She was a girl in a cage you built with lies. Vincent chuckled. Funny. I don't remember hiring you to dig into my personal affairs. You didn't, Elijah said coldly. Your fiancé's sister did. At that, Vincent's face shifted. The charm peeled away, and something uglier settled beneath. She's alive, he hissed. You bet your fine boots she is, Coulter said. And if you ever want to see the outside of a cell again, you'll turn your horse and ride out. But Vincent just laughed. You think I came all this way for nothing? She saw something she wasn't supposed to. She run her mouth. And men like me, he stepped closer, boots crunching over gravel, don't get to where I am by letting ghosts talk. Elijah pulled his gun. That's far enough. Vincent stopped. The 2 men behind him tensed. For a second, it was as if time itself held its breath. Then Coulter said, quiet and slow, you touch one hair on her head, and I'll make sure you don't live to regret it. Vincent sneered. You're nobody. Just some ranch hand hiding in the hills. Coulter stepped forward, eyes calm. Maybe, but she trusted me, and that makes me more dangerous than you'll ever be. The moment snapped. Vincent went for his pistol, but Elijah was faster. A shot rang out. One of Vincent's men dropped. Chaos exploded. Horses screamed. Dust flew. Coulter tackled the second man to the ground, fists flying, blood slicking his knuckles. Elijah fired again, missed. Vincent vanished behind his horse, galloping off into the scrub. Coulter stood over the man he'd knocked down, chest heaving. Stay down, he growled. Silence fell again, sharp and sudden. Only one rider had escaped. Let him go, Elijah said, wiping sweat from his brow. He'll run now. He's lost what mattered, control. Coulter's hands shook slightly as he wiped blood from his jaw. I don't like loose ends. Elijah gave a half smile. Neither do I, but she's safe. That's what matters. They rode hard for the convent. Annabelle met them at the gate, eyes wide, searching. Coulter dismounted, face bloodied, shirt torn. She ran to him before he could speak, arms wrapping around him tight, like she needed to feel that he was solid. Real, I thought, she began, but he hushed her with a whisper. I told you. Always. Rachel was in a room near the chapel now, warm and quiet, her breathing raspier, but her eyes peaceful. Annabelle sat beside her, tears on her cheeks. It's done, she whispered. He's gone. Rachel smiled. Then we've both outlived him. Coulter watched from the doorway, hat in hand, something inside him beginning to soften, to let go. That night, after the sisters had fallen, asleep beneath wool blankets, and whispered prayers, Coulter stepped out under the stars. Elijah joined him. She's not the same girl you found on that ridge, Elijah said. No, Coulter replied. She's stronger. Elijah nodded. So, are you? They stood there a while. Two men who'd seen too much, and finally found something worth standing for. The sun rose gently over the convent walls, casting soft light across the white stone and into the courtyard, where wildflowers dared to grow. Through cracks in the clay, the storm had passed, leaving behind that rare, precious kind of silence, the kind that comes after fear, after survival. It didn't shout peace, it whispered it. Annabelle sat by Rachel's bedside, brushing a loose curl from her sister's damp forehead. The worst had passed, but Rachel was still weak. Her smile came slower, and her breath caught more often. But her spirit, God help her, was fierce as ever. You remember Mama's garden? Rachel rasped one morning, voice no louder than wind through lace curtains. All those yellow tulips she swore could outlast a frost. Annabelle nodded, tears brimming. She said they bloomed because they didn't know any better. Thought the cold was just part of spring. Rachel chuckled softly. Reckon that's us. Coulter spent the days repairing a broken section of the convent fence, fixing a cracked water trough, and riding into town for supplies. The nuns had taken to him quick. Said he was quiet, but kind. The kind of man who fixed things with his hands when words wouldn't do. One afternoon, Sister Agnes handed him a bundle of letters. From the children. They saw what you did. They wrote you prayers. Coulter blinked. I didn't do anything special. She smiled. Sometimes showing up is the most special thing of all. Meanwhile, Elijah packed to leave. He stood near the stables, saddling his horse with a practiced rhythm. You sure you won't stay a few days longer? Annabelle asked. Elijah shook his head. I'm no good at sitting still. I've got others to help. Trails to follow. She placed a hand on his arm. You saved my life. My sister's too. Thank you. He tipped his hat. You saved your own. I just made sure the story didn't end early. Before he rode off, he pulled Coulter aside. She needs more than shelter now, he said quietly. She needs something to believe in. Coulter nodded slowly. I'm still learning how to offer that. Then keep learning, Elijah said, mounting up. She's worth it. That evening, as dusk settled and the convent bell rang vespers, Coulter found Annabelle, sitting alone in the garden. Her eyes were turned upward, watching the sky fade from gold to violet. She asked me today if I'd stay, she said. Rachel said the sisters offered to let us both stay here as long as we wanted. Coulter sat beside her on the bench. And do you want to? Annabelle picked a dry leaf from her lap, twirling it between her fingers. I want to stop running. I want to believe I can belong somewhere without hiding. I think I want to build something. She looked at him then, fully. But not here. Not behind walls. Somewhere open. Somewhere like that cabin of yours. His heart stumbled at that. You'd come back? He asked. She nodded. If the invitation's still open. He gave a slow smile. It always was. The next day, Rachel gave her blessing with a soft squeeze of Annabelle's hand. Go, she whispered. I'm not afraid anymore. You gave me that. They stayed another week. Let Rachel regain some strength. Let peace become less foreign. Annabelle read to her from an old leather Bible, and Coulter planted fresh lavender in the convent's small garden. He wasn't a church-going man, but he believed in tending to what grows. On their final morning, the sisters gathered to send them off. Rachel hugged her sister long and quiet, holding back tears with trembling strength. Go build the life we dreamed of, she said. And write when you can. I'll be right here. Where the tulips grow brave. Annabelle nodded, her voice thick, always. As they rode away, Coulter, leading Annabelle behind on her Maratha, wind picked up, warm and sweet. The mountains in the distance looked smaller now. Not because they'd shrunk, but because the weight they carried had lifted. They didn't speak much that day. Just rode steady, side by side. But that night, under a sky full of stars, Annabelle leaned against Coulter near the fire. Her hand found his, and she said quietly, You know what I want. What? He asked. She smiled. A garden, at the cabin, with tulips, and chickens, and a swing out front. He grinned. That all? For now, she whispered. Ask me again tomorrow. He looked at her for a long moment. I will. The cabin looked smaller than Annabelle remembered, though truthfully, she'd only ever seen it once, and through the haze of cold and fear. Now, with spring just starting to stitch green back into the hills, and the creek near the porch running, full and clear, it felt different. Not a hiding place anymore. A beginning. Coulter pulled up first, stepping down from his horse with a soft grunt. He turned, reached for her reins. Welcome home, he said, quiet but certain. She slid down into his arms without hesitation. The word home still felt fragile, like something borrowed. But when she looked round at the porch, with its crooked chair, at the smoke curling from the stone chimney, at the fence he'd mended, and the wild columbine blooming by the door, it didn't feel borrowed at all. It felt earned. Inside, nothing had changed. And yet everything had. Coulter had laid out a second mug beside the stove, a second blanket on the rocker near the fire, a shelf, half empty, ready to be filled. That night, after stew and silence and 2 mugs of strong coffee, Annabelle stepped out onto the porch and looked at the stars. They look different here, she said. Coulter leaned against the rail beside her. They ain't, we are. A few days later, they started building the garden. Coulter turned the earth while Annabelle marked rows with twine. She planted tulip bulbs, just like she promised Rachel, and Coulter dug a spot for a swing. They worked, slow, deliberate, like every seed planted was a promise to stay. Some days were quiet. Others, not so much. There were nights when Annabelle would wake in a sweat, reaching for something in the dark. On those nights, Coulter would simply take her hand and hold it until the tremble passed. "I'm still figuring out how to breathe," she told him once, curled on the porch swing as a summer storm grumbled beyond the hills. He nodded. Breathin' don't come easy after holding it too long. One morning, while repairing the roof, Coulter found a wooden box in the rafters. Inside, a handful of old letters, yellowed and soft, written in a woman's careful hand. He brought them down, showed her. "They were your mother's," he said. "She stayed here, before me, helped build this place. Maybe that's why it draws folks who need mending." Annabelle read them slowly that afternoon, sitting by the fire with her knees drawn to her chest. Words about faith, about forgiveness, about starting over in a place where the wind didn't ask questions. She talked about choosing joy, Annabelle said, even when it didn't make sense. Coulter gave a small smile. "Sounds like someone else I know." Later that week, a rider came up the trail, a boy, maybe 17, with dust in his teeth and a telegram in his hand. He handed it to Annabelle and tipped his hat. "From Bent Willow," he said. "The convent." Her hands trembled as she opened it. "Rachel has taken a turn, but she is smiling. Said she saw you in her dreams last night. She wanted you to know she's at peace, that your roots are growing, that she's proud." Annabelle sat on the porch for a long time after that, not crying, just still. And Coulter sat beside her, because sometimes silence is the only way to say "I understand." That night, she lit a candle in the window, like the nuns had taught her. "It's for her," she whispered. "So she knows I'm still holding her light." Weeks passed, then months. The garden grew. Coulter carved her a swing from cedar, and she spent hours there, sketching with charcoal and scraps of paper, capturing faces she remembered and places she missed. Sometimes he'd find a drawing tucked near the hearth, Rachel's eyes, the curve of the convent bell, his own hands wrapped around hers. One night, as the fire crackled low, Coulter turned to her. "Been thinking," he said, "about us, about what we've built here." She smiled, setting her cup down. "And I want to give you something." He reached into his coat and pulled out a ring knot, new, not flashy, just silver, worn with a blue stone in the middle, the color of prairie sky before a rain. "This was my ma's," he said. "She gave it to Pa before he left for war. Said if he came back, they'd start a life. He never did, but she kept it. Said it reminded her what love meant. Not promise of safety, but of choice." Annabelle's eyes filled. "I'm not asking you to be someone you're not," Coulter said gently. "I just want you to know I've already chosen you, and I'll keep choosing you. Every sunrise, every storm." She reached for the ring, her hand steady. "Then I'll choose you back." And in the quiet of a cabin tucked deep in the hills, with nothing but firelight and the sound of night creatures beyond the porch, 2 broken people sealed a vow, not with fanfare, but with peace. Autumn came to the hills like a quiet guest, the air bronzing the trees and turning the creek from wild to thoughtful. The garden had begun to brown at the edges. Tulips long since bloomed and bowed. Annabelle gathered seeds into a cloth pouch, fingers gentle, movements slow. Beside her, Coulter leaned on the fence post, watching with a kind of reverence usually reserved for sunsets or Sunday prayers. "She always said I'd grow things someday." Annabelle murmured. "Your sister," she nodded. "Said I had hands, made for healing." I didn't believe her back then. I thought all I knew how to do was run. Coulter glanced toward the ridge, where golden light cut through the aspens. "You didn't run this time." "No," she said softly. "I stayed." Inside the cabin, Things had changed just enough to feel full. The shelf now held more than mugs and tins, books, a pressed flower in a frame, Rachel's last letter. Annabelle had tacked up her sketches on one wall, Coulter's weathered hands. The cabin at dawn, a single tulip bending in the wind. On the table sat a new of Coulter's work. 2 birds, side by side, carved from walnut. The days settled into rhythm. She read in the mornings, worked in the garden midday, and painted in the golden hour. Coulter fixed fences, chopped wood, and wrote in a leather-bound journal. He never let her peek inside, not yet. One night, by the fire, she asked, "You ever think about the past? About who you were before this place?" He sipped his coffee, thoughtful. "I think about it less now. It don't haunt like it used to. Feels like another life. One that had to break so this one could start." Annabelle leaned her head on his shoulder. "Me too." They never had a wedding. Not one with a preacher or a dress. But one morning, after the first frost kissed the garden, they walked down to the edge of the creek, just the 2 of them. Coulter took her hands and said, "This is the only life I want, and you're the only home I need." She smiled through tears. "Then let's keep building it, one sunrise at a time." Later that week, a package arrived by mail rider, handwritten, pages from Rachel's journal, sent by the convent after her passing. There were drawings too, childlike sketches of 2 girls by a river, their names written in soft pencil. Annabelle read each word by lantern light, tears falling freely. Coulter sitting beside her without saying a thing, just there, his presence. Enough. One entry read, "If she ever reads this, Belle, I want you to know I never saw you as broken. You were wildfire. You were thunder before the rain. I'm glad you ran. It saved us both. And if you've found someone kind, someone quiet, someone who listens more than he speaks, hold on to him. That's the kind of love that stays." Annabelle folded the pages gently and placed them beside the ring box. Winter came early that year. Heavy snow blanketed the roof, and they spent days inside cooking, reading, sometimes sitting in companionable silence. When spring returned, they planted again. Tulips, yes, but vegetables too. And columbine, which Coulter said reminded him of her, bright, stubborn, and beautiful in places no one expected. One morning, as birds returned and the world greened once more, Coulter handed her a book. She opened it, his journal. Inside, pages about her, about the night she collapsed on his porch, about her first laugh, her first sketch, the first time she said home. "I didn't know how to say it out loud," he said, "so I wrote it." She kissed him, slow, deep, like a promise. And when the spring rains came, washing the hills clean, they stood together on the porch and watched the earth breathe again. Annabelle placed a hand on her belly, where new life stirred. Her eyes found Coulter's. "You think there's room in this cabin for one more?" He grinned. "There's room for whatever the good Lord sends us." And there, beneath a sky that no longer felt heavy, with hands still scarred but full of warmth, they let the past rest, they let the future in, and they chose over and over again not just to stay, but to grow. Because sometimes healing isn't a moment, it's a season. And love isn't loud, it's steady. What part of this journey spoke to you most? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story stayed with you, consider joining us for more. There's always another trail ahead, and you're welcome here.